Friday, 19 June 2026. 3 Asia-Pacific AI stories before your first coffee. Washington's Federal Energy Regulatory Commission ordered U.S. grid operators to fast-track data center connections above 20 megawatts and shift upgrade costs onto developers, a ruling whose logic is now reverberating across Asia-Pacific, where the binding constraint on AI expansion has moved from chips to firm, affordable power. Asia-Pacific data center electricity consumption sits at roughly 320 terawatt-hours in 2024 and is projected to reach around 780 terawatt-hours by 2030. Singapore has already hit a grid ceiling. Malaysia faces a 7-fold rise in AI-related power demand, and Japan is actively pairing new compute capacity with dedicated clean generation. Why it matters. The FERC framework gives Asian regulators a live template for the question they can no longer defer. Who pays for grid upgrades, and whether AI workloads should jump the interconnection queue ahead of other industrial users. Singapore's moratorium on new data center capacity already showed what happens when power planning lags demand. Malaysia and Indonesia, both courting hyperscaler investment, now face the same sequencing problem at a much earlier stage of grid development. Capital allocators backing Asian AI infrastructure should watch for 2 signals: whether national utilities adopt cost causation rules similar to FERC's developer pays model, and whether clean power purchase agreements become a gating requirement for new data center permits. The second-order effect worth tracking is a potential divergence in build timelines across ASEAN, splitting markets that can co-locate generation from those that cannot. So, SpaceX is acquiring AIinAsia, the maker of AI coding tool Cursor, for $60 billion in an all-stock deal, marking the largest AI acquisition of 2026. The move lands just days after SpaceX completed a record $75 billion IPO and follows its absorption of xAI in February, giving Elon Musk's aerospace and AI conglomerate a direct paying foothold in the developer tools market against Anthropic and OpenAI. Cursor has become the default coding assistant for a significant share of engineering teams across Asia, making the ownership change immediately relevant to builders from Bangalore to Seoul. Why it matters. Asian development teams that rely on Cursor now route their code context through a SpaceX subsidiary, and that shift in data custody is a real trigger for sovereignty reviews across regulated sectors in India, South Korea, Japan, and Southeast Asia. Procurement and infosec teams at banks, telcos, and government contractors will be the first to flag the change, potentially accelerating adoption timelines for local alternatives such as Alibaba's Tony Lima, Naver and Kakao's coding tools in Korea, and Solvum in India. The second-order effect worth tracking is whether this deal gives Asian AI coding startups a fundraising catalyst, as VCs who previously saw the space as locked up by Cursor now have a sovereignty wedge to underwrite local challengers. Now, Washington is pushing Apple toward an Intel foundry partnership on U.S. soil, with President Trump announcing the 2 companies have agreed to design and build chips together domestically. Neither Apple nor Intel has confirmed terms, and analysts expect any initial work to cover older or lower volume parts rather than the cutting-edge silicon that TSMC fabricates at advanced nodes in Taiwan. The move lands as both TSMC and Samsung are already expanding U.S. fab capacity under CHIPS Act incentives, making the competitive dynamics across Asia's semiconductor corridor more legal than a simple reshoring headline suggests. Why it matters. The near-term revenue hit to TSMC is minimal because Apple's most advanced processors still depend on fabrication technology no one else can match at scale. Samsung feels the shoulder pressure. Intel's U.S. foundry ambitions, now carrying White House backing, compete directly for the second-source contracts that Samsung has been chasing. Capital allocators watching Asia's chip supply chain should track whether Apple begins qualifying Intel for any volume production, because even a small shift in allocation changes how Samsung and TSMC price their next capacity commitments. The second-order effect worth monitoring is Taiwan's strategic calculus. As long as TSMC's advanced node lead holds, the island remains indispensable to global AI hardware, but every credible alternative fab chips away at that leverage over time. That is your AI in Asia briefing for today. Stay sharp, build well, see you tomorrow.